Um, this is specific to this particular assignment. We're looking at models to implement more creativity in the classroom. So I know that one of the things with differentiated instruction, we look at student readiness issues, their interest, and their learning profile, which can also mean their preference, their style, their intellectual style, their learning preference. My particular team has been focusing on creativity, and so I'm wondering, is there any thing you might suggest to us in terms of infusing more creativity in the classroom? And I guess it fits in the, trying to avoid the one-size-fits-all model. But in your experience as a teacher and as a professor, do you find that that's something that is one of the, what they call the soft skills at Harvard, things that technology won't be able to do? Do you find that that's going to take on a new meaning, and how?
Well, creativity, of course, is a human characteristic, and so it's lurking around with all of us. We just keep it covered up sort of nicely lots of times. And we're in a time right now where education sort of indicates that what we should all do is get everybody to the same place on the same right answer, to be administered on the same day, marked in that little circle, because it's much easier to score that than it is to score a creative response. And we're going to have to kind of come to grips with that some. It's very hard for teachers to be told that they're good teachers based on only right answers to information, and at the same time be told to be creative with their students, because the two don't take you necessarily to the same place at the same moment. And probably now, given this heavy emphasis on just correct answers for a number of years, it would take us a while to shake that creativity loose back in the classroom again. It's never been the easiest sell. And certainly given that all of our focus has been on convergence rather than divergence in the last few years, it'd probably be tougher than normal. But here's one of the, it takes a teacher who understands the content to be able to say, so what are the big ideas? What are the unanswered questions? What are dilemmas I can give kids that they're going to have to act on, and therefore they'll have to use this information and jiggle it around and go hunting for ways to fill holes in the pictures that they have. What are ways that I can cast them in the roles of experts and doers and professionals rather than just absorbers of knowledge? How can I create assignments that call on the kids to generate knowledge rather than just to reproduce knowledge? What do I do in my classroom to make sure that kids do have the fundamental things that they need in order to generate knowledge? Because you aren't creative in a vacuum. You have to know some content to do that. So how do I lead from the content to the divergence, or start with the divergence but make sure we build the content in as we go? It's a different way of thinking about curriculum. But again, classrooms are just so incredibly more exciting when students are working that way, not just for kids but for teachers. Holy cow, it's a so much better way to teach. But the real punchline, of course, is if you were to say to anybody now, demographers, statisticians, social workers, educators, economy, well, maybe not educators, economists, almost anybody, what are these kids going to need to thrive and survive in the world that they're going to be in? I don't think I've read a single person's work or heard a single person who has authority in that area to say, oh, what they're going to need is a set of right answers. And that'll do it. Just teach them the information and they'll have it. They're going to have to be problem solvers. They're going to have to be generators of knowledge. They're going to have to be hugely adaptive. And so I think, again, the question is not whether does it make sense to do that, but on what ethical basis would we not do it?
The final question, Carol, is what is the best advice you might give to teachers for the future of our schools and for our children?
This sort of seems like maybe a flip answer, but it actually, I think about this a lot. I think we need to remind prospective teachers, and then I think it's okay to say it to practicing teachers every once in a while, that teaching is a lousy job, and it's an amazing calling. And any of us who go to work to do just a job don't have a very good job, because it is too ridden with problems, too many factors, too many things out of our control, too many nuisances. If you're just doing a job, you can do a job in a bazillion more settings with less hassle than you can teaching. Teaching is a great profession. It's a great calling. And if you enter the classroom every day, I met a young man a couple of years ago, and he's just really sort of sticks with me. He was a new teacher, and he was in a conference in Washington, D.C., where I was, and we'd been talking, about some of these ideas that are challenging to people for the morning, and at a break he said to me, I'm so new with teaching and I make so many stupid mistakes that some days I don't even know if I'll make it as a teacher, but he said, I do one thing every day that seems important to me. And I said, tell me about it. And he said, every day when the kids come in the room, I stand at the door and I speak to each of them individually and try to say one personal thing to them, which I think a lot of us do and have heard, but it was the second part of what he said that sticks with me. He said, and as each student passes me and enters the room, every single time I say to myself, please help me be the teacher for this kid that I want my son to have today. And I said to him, you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay. If we quit seeing jobs and start seeing kids, if we understand their potential and their dreams and the fragile nature of their lives and the experiences they bring to us and the fears that they have and the hopes for themselves, if we saw every one of them as our own kid, we'd teach very differently. We'd choose curriculum differently. We'd deal with technology differently. We'd handle creativity differently. And I think people, the teachers who make schools sparkle, the ones that we remember even in our decrepit old age, are the ones who saw us and the ones who reached out to us and who made the curriculum live for us because they thought we were important enough to do important things. And I think that's really it. If we do that, the rest of it's okay. I mean, it's not that it's not hard. It's not that we know the answers. But I think if we saw those kids as our own, we wouldn't just keep getting them to fill out worksheets. We wouldn't just say, well, I covered it. If you got it, that's fine. And if you didn't, that's just not my problem. And I think also if we saw sort of like the opening of these living things every day going in, it'd be pretty cool to get up in the morning. So that may sound sort of schmaltzy, but I actually believe that's the essence of teaching. It's not about a book of rules. It's not about proficiency certificates or whatever. It's about whether we make contact with human beings in such a way that we commend to them the huge excitement of human learning. If we do that, it's a good role, but it is a lousy job. As good a profession as it is, as good a calling as it is, if all it is a job, it's not going to work.
Yeah. But that's what you refer to in your book, fulfilling the promise of the differentiated classroom. So the teacher's response to children's needs.
It's actually kind of an interesting story with that, and then we'll call it a day here. As you know from your work here, there are a couple of other books that I had written before that one, and two of my doctoral students came in to chat one day. It was not an accidental conversation, and in talking to me, they were both teachers who cared a great deal about the emotional well-being of the kids in their classroom, their development as whole human beings. There were also parents who cared about that in regard to their own children, so they were doctoral students who, had children of their own. And they ended up saying to me, here's the deal. You've spent a lot of time talking about curriculum and managing classrooms and principles of differentiation and that kind of thing, but you're assuming that people have that affective underpinning. And one of them said to me, just seeing you in class, I think that's just second nature to you, but you need to be aware it's not second nature to everybody in schools. And if you're not as careful to deal with that as you have been the other things, that other stuff just won't count for very much. And so in the front of that book, I actually acknowledge those two students. That was correct. That should have been the first book I wrote. For me, that whole connection thing is so central to teaching that it's like breathing, and I don't have to remind myself to breathe when I get up in the morning. It just sort of happens. But if it's missing, the rest of it doesn't count for very much. And so I appreciate it was a gift those two students brought to me to remind me, sort of what the foreground is and what the background is, and that you have to have both pieces, but you sure can't neglect the humans. A woman whose name I'm going to forget right now wrote a book called My Life in School. I've forgotten the subtitle too, so I'm doing that really well. Actually, the book I can't remember that much of, but one of the comments she makes in there is, again, one of the ones that to me is just so central it'll stick with me for a long, long time. She said, teaching is essentially about building lives, and I think it is. And so what we do in the classroom is not so we can say, ooh, I differentiate instruction, or ooh, I covered the curriculum. It's to be able to, or even, ooh, I use technology, or see, there was a piece of creativity. The point of it is to build lives. And if we're using it toward that end and doing that well, we're okay.